Nice. Perfect. It's nice to be here with all of you today. We would love to know in the chat, if you are joining us live, where you are zooming in from, and your favorite thing about working with young people. So I am, and we'll get into introductions in a moment. I'm Shira Engel. I'm zooming in from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And my favorite thing about working with young people is that, I mean, on a selfish level, it's that I'm never bored. It is always very engaging. And I think that on maybe a less selfish level, my favorite thing about working with young people is that they, especially older striving readers, is that they have a lot of really well-developed interests, and it is so fun engaging them based on those interests. So we would love to know those two things in the chat if you could just drop it in there. I love that. The new perspectives young people help us to consider. We'll give about one more minute for this. I know it's like a big question. Awesome. Yay. Thank you, James, for calling in from Hope for Youth and Families. The being able to learn things about yourself through working with young people, that's huge. I think we often talk about books as, and this is we do this a lot in our Storyshares resources, looking at books as windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. Um, and I think in so many ways, the people we work with are also windows into other experiences, mirrors of our own experiences, and sliding glass doors where we can kind of go in between the two.
Uh,
Okay, we'll give like 30 more seconds for folks to add to the chat, and you're welcome to add to the chat as we go through our webinar today and our time together. If you have questions, you're also welcome to add those to the chat as we go, and we will be moderating it and making sure that we address the things that you bring up by the end of the webinar. Okay. So I look forward to continuing to read through your introductions in the chat. In the meantime, I will have Peggy introduce herself, and then I will go ahead and introduce myself.
well, it's nice to see everybody here and to be doing this with Shira, who I think I met now. It's been almost 2 years ago at a conference and was just very wowed by story shares and the similarity in the missions of what she was doing with everybody at Story Shares and what we do at SuperDville. And SuperDville, just in short, which I'm the founder and CEO of, is a video-based social emotional skills building curriculum for kids with learning differences and, you know, often called learning disabilities, but I like to say learning differences. And I am a filmmaker, but I'm also dyslexic. And that's a big part of why SuperDville came into being, because I got help really young. And we're talking way back in the early 60s. And it was rare to be even identified at that point to have dyslexia or other kinds of LD, as it's often called. And so I've always wanted to give back. I mean, that was in my mind as I became an adult and then had a career as a filmmaker. And then fast forward a little, and my daughter ended up having dyslexia. And I just saw as she was starting to go through school that not that much had changed. And so as I got to a point in my career that I could really devote myself to this project, it really became a passion. And, working with kids with learning differences of all kinds has just been an amazing experience for me and helped me to shed my own feelings of aloneness and stigma. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Peggy. And just a shout out to the Dyslexia Alliance for Black Children Conference, which is where Peggy and I met. Storyshares and SuperDville have both been vendors at that conference, and we've tabled there. It's an amazing virtual conference, and the DABC is a really phenomenal organization. So I just wanted to give that quick shout out before I forgot. But I'm Shira Engel. I'm the Director of Education at Storyshares. That the picture of me on the screen is of me in my first middle school classroom. I taught sixth grade humanities. I then continued on to teach seventh and eighth grade humanities. In my first year of teaching middle school, I had an experience where I was fresh out of a master's program for secondary English education. I knew how to design a curriculum that met grade level standards. I knew how to teach students how to write a literary analysis essay. I knew how to teach Shakespeare. I took a whole class on teaching Shakespeare in grad school. I knew all sorts of ways to engage students in accessing like literature with a capital L, we can say. And I had a lot of students in my class who I learned on day one struggled to sound out single syllable words. And they were sixth grade students, and I panicked because I did not know. I knew so much about teaching students who were reading to learn, and I did not know how to teach students who were learning to read. So I ended up taking a couple steps back and becoming a dyslexia specialist. In part to work with students with dyslexia, but also because some of the best practices for supporting students with dyslexia, and as Peggy mentioned, there are so many students with dyslexia who are undiagnosed for a variety of reasons. But a lot of students who sometimes struggle with their foundational literacy skills benefit from a curriculum that's rooted in structured literacy practices. And they benefit from learning in a way that is dyslexia friendly. So I come to this work through that lens. And at Storyshares, I really work on our teacher-facing resources and really making our books and materials and partnerships friendly to schools, to teachers, to organizations that we work with, to foundations that do really amazing literacy programs so that we can really get as many students as possible reading and engaged with what they read and eventually identifying as readers as well. So speaking of, Storyshares seeks to reimagine the global library to inspire a love of reading. And we do this through crowdsourcing a lot of our content, and then through creating a designated cohort of authors who are really, really good at telling a very engaging story using language that supports students in developing their reading skills and their foundational literacy skills. So Storyshares actually just closed out a contest. Storyshares has an annual writing contest called the Story of the Year contest, where we crowdsource content from all over the world, and we give a lot of authors a lot of guidelines on how to write a very high interest text at a more developing lower skill level so that all students at every intersection of ability and interest have an engaging book that they both can read and want to read. From that contest, we generate a big library of over 500 books, and that will grow quite a bit after we go through this year's contest submissions. And then from that library, we are able to curate some of our authors who do a particularly excellent job at telling a very engaging story using language that is really accessible. And we have trained those authors to write our decodable chapter books, which we are going to discuss later in today's webinar, so that you can see that that real bridge from structured literacy practices, really looking at the science of reading, looking at those key social emotional factors that play into reading motivation, and developing a growth mindset for literacy, and how those live in our books.
Well, how do we fit into all of that? Because SuperDville, I think, really is an example of taking social emotional learning and doing what we're calling targeted SEL, where we're focusing on struggling learners. Whereas, dyslexia is a big part of that, but sometimes kids aren't identified with dyslexia. So, what SuperDville has done is create short videos that are based on themes that kids struggle with, and such as a basic one is confidence, and can be focus. It could be procrastination, a big one. We get a lot of interest in that. Self-advocacy. And what's pretty unique about what we did is we cast real kids who have learning differences, not kids who were professional actors and were going to just play out a script. So the kids themselves workshop the material, and we picked obviously kids who wanted to perform, and over 100 showed up to our first casting call. It was amazing. The criteria was they had to want to perform, and they also had to be willing to be public for the rest of their lives about having a learning difference. So it was incredible how many kids came out, and we got to pick really talented children who have acted in our videos. And along with each video is a scripted lesson plan and hands-on activities. And all of this was designed with research-based material, as well as an advisory board of neuroscientists, psychologists, people who were experts in the field that could help us identify what were the most important themes, what was the best way to approach them. And if you go to our website, we have two wonderful white papers written by an educator at Tufts, and actually a psychologist, and from Hunter College, Graduate School of Education. So, what I think in some ways the best way to understand what we do is to have us show you our very short trailer that introduces the feeling of the videos and what the mission and goal of SuperDville is. And when hearing about it, I mean, we are focusing on, specifically, there are videos that are about kids with dyslexia. There's two specific ones in the third grade and fourth grade series. But honestly, as we all know, there's lots of kids who don't get identified when they're young. It's getting better, but it's still a problem. And then there can be kids who are struggling readers for other reasons, and what we're doing helps all of those categories, if you want to call it. So let's go ahead and show the trailer.
I'm having trouble at school.
Aren't we all?
I'm never gonna be good at spelling, so I'm just gonna give up.
I have a solution for your problem.
Singing is a great way to remember things.
It's a great way to remember those complicated names.
A cutscene reads the words. The left brain transfers them to the right brain. The right brain then helps translate into pictures.
Isn't it cool to know that there are Super D kids all over the world just like us?
Hi, I'm Brooklyn.
I'm Kaya.
My name is Charlie.
I am dyslexic and I have ADD.
Thinking differently is thinking smart.
Here's your chance to show us what your Super D brain can do.
What are your goals and dreams? We cut out clouds and wrote our goals on them. It's just really good practice to set goals.
Come up with 3 ingredients that you think would make a delicious, weird, or outrageous dish. Then draw what the final dish will look like.
It might take a few months, or even a few years. But if you keep working at it, you're only gonna get better.
Thanks, that means a lot, guys.
Super D!
So we are going to get back to the SuperDville Storyshares connection, and all of the different ways that that our missions are similar, and then the ways that the ways how we enact that mission can sometimes be different too, and very complementary. So for the rest of our time together, we are going to unpack some research to really look at the connection between literacy development and social emotional learning, focusing on how strong SEL skills can empower striving readers, particularly those with learning differences. And we are also going to bridge that gap between research and practice with practical strategies. So the goal here is to give everyone some actionable strategies to foster both literacy and social emotional learning in tandem, through books and materials and videos and curricula, but also through some core principles. And then one of those principles is peer-to-peer connections. And so we're going to talk about the profound impact of peer support and shared experiences for older striving readers in helping to cultivate a sense of community and belonging. Okay. So for Peggy, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I love that you ended with the peer-to-peer because that's obviously very central to what we're doing. And I think that what's powerful, that we've all kind of probably have experienced is that when you struggle with something, if you feel like you're the only one who's struggling with it, it becomes a much huger problem in your mind. And if you think about something, whether you have dyslexia or not, or ADD, something you've tried to learn, like a new piece of technology or a second language or pickleball or whatever it might be, and you've struggled, you know what some of the emotions are that surface. So imagine if those emotions happen to you every day from the time you were little, and you went to school and people around you were not struggling anywhere near as much as you were. And so, I think that on this slide, we, have, there's just a lot of research out there that talks about, how kids with learning disabilities can be prone to social and communication challenges, depression, and, how when you change that paradigm by developing and helping them understand their learning goals, giving them a sense of belonging, of community, and specifically working on ways for them to develop resilience, you really are helping those kids develop a way and a strategy to understand how they learn best. And all the research shows that that's a key component to them then being able to take a decodable book and benefit from it. So the two clearly, have to go hand in hand. And I think that, one of the things that we saw in even creating our cast of kids who all had learning differences was that they became a community, these third and fourth and fifth graders that really helped each other as things would come up because they all, struggled with maybe reading the script and memorizing and had to come up with strategies. So I think that the research is out there, and as Shira said, that we now are really understanding that some of the ways of teaching reading to kids with dyslexia have become some fundamental ways in the science of reading discussion that help all kids learn how to read. And so, I think that it's the same thing with social emotional learning when it's targeted to help struggling dyslexic LD learners. It can also help kids who are struggling for all different kinds of reasons in a classroom. So this slide we created because we wanted to show the Castle wheel, which some of you might be familiar with. And, Castle has been working for decades on the Coalition of Applied Social Emotional Learning. And they came up with what were the 5 categories that they felt, were very key. And then we added, meaning working with some of the top people in the country who are researching the topic of what helps kids with learning differences, that what was critical to also focus on was the idea of learning goals, resilience, and belonging, which, I just spoke about. And clearly, helping children, which our videos do, to understand how to develop realistic goals, how to not feel alone, and how to work on not giving up is very, very, important for this pathway to work, and for them to be able to have the cognitive and academic advancements. And so, we don't just have videos. I mean, we have designed a curriculum, which is, you'll learn later more about, of how Storyshares fits into that. And the curriculum is very much about the idea that the video helps create community and spurs on discussion. But then it's really important to help kids learn sort of in different ways through kinesthetic, hands-on experiences, and have them designed so that they also work for different kids. And, the last thing about this, we could have done a second slide, which could have been, the sort of wire imploding, which is that there was a study in 2012, and that data showed that when the brain centers for distress are activated, they actually impair the functioning of the areas in the brain that need to be working in order to have, memory, attention, and learning. And so, it's clear that particularly for kids who are struggling, if we don't deal with what, I've just been describing, this pathway is not going to work very well. So Shira, I think.
So because of everything that Peggy just shared, we really believe that integrating social emotional learning with literacy instruction and with the content involved in literacy instruction can help students succeed academically. And there are so many reasons for that, and all of those connect really beautifully back to that graphic. But it helps students build their self-confidence, it lessens their anxiety, and it supports them in better understanding how they learn best. And all of that can lead to greater metacognition, of really allowing students to know how they learn. And for reading, metacognition is the foundation for reading comprehension as well. And it's really, when we talk about think alouds in teaching, we're talking about making our thinking really visible. And when we do that, we give students a pathway to access any text. And it's really hard to access a text, especially when there's a history of something feeling really challenging, if the confidence isn't there, and if there's a lot of anxiety that is standing between the student and the text itself. So integrating social emotional learning with instruction it's not a bonus, it's not an extra, it is core to literacy instruction. Literacy instruction is not possible without strong social emotional learning, particularly for older students who have had time to develop a reading identity. And we talk about reading identities often as something that is really positive. So like, my reading identity is someone who really loves fantasy novels. That is, and who has developed interests in books about in books about Tudor England, for example. Like, those are parts of my reading identity. But there are also reading identities that we form when we're really young, when we have our first experience of either being able to read a text successfully or not being able to read a text successfully, or being asked to read in front of the class and making a miscue or an error in our reading aloud, and then that getting called out in front of other people. So all of those lead us to really strongly believe in the research that literacy and social emotional learning have to go hand in hand. because we really want to foster reading identities that enable students to grow their skills. And then creating an instruction ecosystem that includes targeted social emotional learning should prompt a huge shift where striving readers and learners who have struggled with reading in the past can improve academically and experience school as the place to run to, not run away from. And so there's the attitude towards reading, and then there's the attitude towards where we develop those reading skills, whether that is in school, in an after-school program, in a library, in an online community, wherever that is, really creating a space where students feel like there is a culture of literacy that they can access is foundational to them developing those skills in the first place. So we really want to foster that connection. So out of this desire to foster that connection came our partnership with SuperDville. We have a joint bundle, and we have Storyshares books that pair with SuperDville videos, and then we have a really wonderful series of books that could be read in paperback, they could be read as read-alouds, they could be read in a variety of ways. But these are decodable chapter books that do exactly what we talked about on the last slide. So they take students through, and we'll talk about them a little bit more later, and you'll be able to see one. But they take students through a scope and sequence that is strategic and based on a systemic progression of skills. And so students start with consonant, vowel, consonant words. There is a strong phonics focus, and they scaffold up until they are reading multisyllabic words with all 6 syllable types. And so each book has its own phonics focus. Each chapter has its own phonics focus. And we received a lot of feedback after our first decodable series from our pilot partners. We've piloted our books in schools across the country and in Canada. And those teachers who piloted our first series, which was for middle school striving readers, shared that one of their favorite things about the Storyshares books was that there were so many diverse experiences that were represented. The characters were coming from all over the world. That is not an accident. That is because our authors come from all over the world. But they did share that one area of representation that was lacking was that they wanted to see, and they wanted their students to experience reading about characters who have dyslexia, who have ADHD, who have different learning differences that the students who are reading these books also have. And so for this series, this was our second series and it's geared towards upper elementary. We recruited a neurodiverse community of authors, and they wrote those characters, often based on their own experiences, who had those learning differences. And that's one of the many ways that these books are able to pair so nicely with the SuperDville social emotional learning curriculum, because we know that we have to address all of these things at once. We often say that at Storyshares, that for older striving readers, we can't just look at phonics. We have to look at phonics while we're looking at comprehension, at knowledge building, at fluency, at morphology. We have to do all of these things at the same time because time is so precious for those older striving readers. And the same is true for social emotional learning. We have to add that layer in and include it in the literacy work itself. And that is really where SuperDville's digital curriculum comes in, and really supporting the whole child in gaining skills that not only enable them to read proficiently, but that also allow them to identify as people who feel like they can grow their skills.
That was beautiful. The way you outlined all of that is amazing, Shira, because when I hear it as someone who's come into this more because of my experience as being, a dyslexic learner and part of the neurodiverse community, I know that, you don't really understand what is being taught to you in the way that you just outlined in terms of decodable books, and you first need to learn this and you need to learn that. What you are initially dealing with is your emotional baggage, potentially, if it has been something like you said earlier that you struggled with, where you had to read aloud, and all of those things. So that's where the peer-to-peer connection is so critical in, I think, particularly social emotional learning work, and even more so for kids who are struggling, who have probably gone inward and feel often that they are the only one, or want to give up, or are angry. And there's a wonderful quote we have from a guidance counselor who said, when she shows the Super D videos, kids in groups or alone, because she does both, open up about things that she could never get them to talk about. And she said it's clear. It's because they're seeing themselves represented in the videos. And we made a real point of having a cast that was diverse in terms of background and ethnicity, because obviously, learning differences across the gamut of our society. And I think that, she said, is just amazing for kids, and to realize that they're not the only one, and to share the experience. So it can seem when you watch one of our videos that there's a lot of humor and whimsy. And a lot of that is because, especially at this, upper elementary age, we need to make sure the kids want to watch the video, right? They need to feel that it isn't sort of adult oriented and they're being made to watch it. So that's where the, peer-to-peer is clearly essential. And, we sort of are normalizing their experience in lots of ways. And we're also really helping with the stigma. There's no doubt that there still is teasing. There still are things that go on for so many kids when they are struggling. And if you're dyslexic and you make certain kinds of mistakes, or you're the kid who can never focus. So that is just sort of more anecdotally explaining to you, where how we came upon this way of creating our curriculum. And I think that one thing, just as you're about to learn sort of more in terms of Storyshares books, is what struck me the very first time I saw them was that how all the upper elementary school series had a photograph of a real child on the cover. And immediately I was like, wow, I love that. And that felt very much like the same language that we're trying to use. And then when you actually go inside the book, there's fantasy, there's lots of wonderful, engaging ways that stories are told. And, that's what we do as well, because obviously the goal is to engage the kids.
So Peggy, at the end of when you mentioned the real students, I actually had to get up and grab a different decodable, not our Storyshares books, but a typical decodable, because I just wanted to highlight one of the reasons why we take advantage of peer-to-peer connections and engaging striving readers, and why it's really an issue of making sure that everyone has something where they feel like it has been created for them and with them in mind. I often say that older students are very good at knowing when something was not created with them in mind. And so seeing themselves represented on the screen, seeing themselves represented in a video, seeing themselves represented on the cover of a book, can often go a really long way, even if the way that book is written is similar to something that might be geared towards younger students typically. As long as that content really appeals to older students, we are able to engage them. So I'm going to hold up a really wonderful decodable book. It is a great decodable book. It is not a Storyshares decodable, but it is very typical, and it does a great job of teaching consonant, vowel, consonant words. So this is This is a decodable, Lad and the Fat Cat. So students are learning words that have three phonemes, and they are able to put together those three phonemes in order to read full words and to read connected text. And so this is what a typical decodable looks like. If we give this to a third, fourth, fifth, sixth grader, there is often that stigma that Peggy mentioned. There is often um, a hesitance to read it. There's sometimes a lot of animosity towards it. Like, this is not a text that's representative of the experiences of older students. However, we really want to make sure that older students are getting the phonics skills in a book like this that is digestible, and that really speaks to, and that is decodable based on what they are able to decode at any given time. So what we did at Storyshares is we anthologized books like these, but with our own stories, into chapter books. So each chapter is its own decodable text. And then from there, one of our strategies to really making sure that students feel connected to both the characters, but also to their grade level peers, is we make sure that these books pass what we call the backpack test. And the backpack test means that if a student pulls, if a striving reader pulls a Storyshares decodable chapter book out of their backpack, it looks like the type of book that their peer, who maybe is reading on grade level, would pull out of their backpack. And so in doing that, we're giving them a book that they are using to grow their skills, that meets them where they're at in terms of skill level, but that also allows them to feel like they are part of a community of readers. So Peggy mentioned this, but one of the ways that we do this also is through those cover images. We want to make sure that we're featuring real students on those covers and real children on those covers who are the age group of the intended audience and of the characters. So we really want to make sure that students are connecting to their peers both in real time, but also that they feel like they're connecting to a peer when they read about the characters in the fiction books that they're moving through. So we do that with the Whole Dream With Us series. We do that with our other series for different age ranges as well. We just want to make sure that an upper elementary student who is working on those foundational reading skills feels like they're not only learning from adults in their lives, they also feel like they are learning from people who are their own age, who have experiences that maybe are similar to theirs, experiences that are different from theirs that they can learn from. And who they feel like in some way they can look up to.
Well, it's just every time I hear you talk, I see more of the connections, which
likewise.
And you know, one of the things that, just as you're talking about the backpack test, is that we were thrilled when we started doing our pilots that we were having teachers in schools say, well, actually, why is this just for, these videos aren't just for kids with learning differences. We should be showing them to all kids, because all kids will benefit from knowing, you know, their strengths and understanding their weaknesses. And so for us, that was both in terms of the content, that was very exciting, but we still had the task of, all right, you want a child to learn a strategy of how to cope with their anxiety, let's say, or to help them build more confidence. But that's sometimes easier said than done, right? To just actually figure out a way to translate that into the kids being engaged and starting to sort of, as I see it, like almost take it into themselves, those concepts, because they're kind of abstract. So what you're seeing here is one of the pages from our website where, you know, we have the video on the right and on the left, the breakdown of what the curriculum that goes alongside the video will be. And it's just to show you that, you know, there's the video, which is, they're all around 5 minutes. And then there's questions that are designed to help a teacher. They can add to it, or a guidance counselor, whomever, to lead a discussion. And then there's 4 or 5 activities. And the fifth activity for some of the videos is one of the StoryShare books. And those books can be used, they're digital on the site, and they can be read aloud, or they can be ordered and in this bundle that Shira mentioned, and the teacher can use them in different ways. So we're going to show, I kind of have to ask you to put on your 5th grade hat and watch our video, Susie Sing and Damon John. For some of you, you might know who Damon John is. One of the people on Shark Tank, an entrepreneur, and many kids in 5th grade watch Shark Tank. It's kind of amazing how universal that show is. The book is a wonderful book that's paired with it, called The Rainforest Quest, which we'll show an example of after you see the video.
Susie sings.
Should I wear this or this?
Are you serious? This is a school dance, not a Caribbean cruise. Let's try something else.
Someone looking for an outfit?
Well, actually...
Thank God you're here. I knew if there was anyone who could help with this, it was you.
Of course.
So any thoughts?
Well, that's hopeless, but I just so happen to have this fantastic new outfit I made myself. Here, try this.
Wow.
You designed it yourself?
Sew at every seam.
Wow. I told you she's the best. You look amazing! You're brilliant, Charlie.
Yeah, you really are. This is the coolest I've ever looked. I'd buy 100 of these if I could.
You know, Charlie, you can make a business out of this.
I could?
Definitely. I was watching Susie Sings the other day, and Damon John was on. He made gazillions designing clothes. I have that episode on my phone. Let's watch.
It's the Think Differently show with our host, Susie Sing.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, please, you're too kind. I don't deserve it. Okay, maybe just a little. Today on the Think Differently show, we have an amazing guest. He started a multi-billion-dollar clothing line in his living room and went on to be an investor on the hit TV show Shark Tank. He's dyslexic and he's really smart. Give a round of applause for Damon John. Ooh, your arms seem small.
Thanks for having me. What happened to your arms?
Oh, I was singing on my unicycle. Not a good idea. So, tell us about yourself. Wait, no. Sing to us about yourself.
Sing?
Sing!
Well, my voice isn't really warmed up yet.
I totally understand. Mommy makes me mash M&M's, Peter Piper picked a pecker.
Do you still want me to tell you about myself?
Please do.
Well, I started a company called FUBU, which stands for Us, By Us. I started in my living room sewing hats myself.
Amazing.
I went out one day selling them on the street, and I came home with $800 profit. From that moment on, I knew I could do it.
But how did you go from $800 profit to billions and billions?
Well, my mom always says it takes the same energy to think small as it does to think big. So I dream big and think bigger. Simple.
That sounds like a song. Dream big, think bigger. Dream big, think bigger.
You know, I'm more of a
big.
hip-hop guy myself.
You mean rap?
Yeah.
Do you rap?
Me? Nah, I'm just a fan of it.
Me too.
I grew up around hip-hop, and that's how my company got so big. Music artists started wearing my clothes, and it caught like wildfire.
Hey, I have a Great idea! Let's come up with a rap.
Nah, girl, I couldn't.
We'll rap about your dyslexia.
Now that I can rap about.
This is your fly MC, the chick you wanna be. I'm the gal with the rhymes, I'm the best you've ever seen. Now let me pass the mic to the guest of the show. He's the man with the plan, the dude you wanna know.
Yo, thanks a lot for that nice intro, but I think there's something that the people gotta know. It's wild, it's crazy, and it's gotta perplex you, but I think I ought to tell you about my dyslexia. I started from the bottom when not a lot of show, had trouble in school, and I didn't wanna go, so my mom let me work part-time during school, and that's how I learned. That business was cool. She said dream big, so I dreamed bigger, worked hard, play hard, now I'm here, go figure. My dyslexia has made me who I am, that's the reason I think like no one else can. Had to read the book 5 times till I got it. Now I know it by heart, and the others forgot it.
Well, you just totally schooled me. That was sick.
Thanks. I didn't know I had that in me.
So you chose a different route to success.
Yeah, my education was very different for me, but it worked. I learned differently, so my mom taught me differently.
Goes to show, you gotta move to the beat of your own drum. Sing your own song.
Exactly.
So, you have connections in the music industry?
I know who's who.
Yeah, I think you could put in a good word.
Yeah, I'll call Beyonce right now.
OMG, I thought Beyonce. Gotta practice my skills. Mommy made for me my shit, my name is Bum Bum. Peter Piper picked a peck of
Hey, B, it's Damon.
Hi, Beyonce. I love you. I'm the captain of your
How you
biggest
doing?
fan club.
How's your music
We'll
doing?
see you next time.
Good?
Think differently.
Nice.
I have all your t-shirts.
Oh, yeah, that's just Susie Sing. That's just Susie Sing.
All the kids that appear in this show have dyslexia or ADHD, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, or other learning differences in real life.
So, to take us back down to earth, I think that when you just see a few pages from the book that it's paired to, what's, you're not going to get the whole experience, but there is the setup of the main character being in the bathtub and then sort of falling asleep and having a dream. And so that kind of whimsy and that letting kids feel a certain amount of sophisticated. I mean, this is how kids enjoy. I mean, this is, so whatever level, if it's still teaching them certain words and you can do it that way. And in our case, the activities, like one of the activities aligned with this is helping kids, they cut out clouds. And the idea is to put some of their dreams in the clouds. And, it's like we use collage, we do sometimes T-charts where they're, comparing ideas. But I mean, all of those things allow kids to take these concepts in that you can be a different learner and still be successful. And obviously success doesn't have to be defined by money. And we make clear that point in some of the discussion. But, I just think that in the end, you could have a group of kids and want to talk to them and say, we really want you to understand that it's fine that you learn differently. And they could just stare at you and be like, that's not really my experience. So, that is how we came up with this idea. And I think, Ashika, maybe you can just show a few pages of the book and read it aloud, because Ashika's good at that.
I have segments of an old map of the rainforest. The map will tell us how to split up the forest between the tribes. We want to be even, just, and civil. I do not understand how to put this map back together. Can you help? Dylan and Alex look at each other. Dylan loves to put together any kind of puzzle, so this task is perfect for him. He is hesitant to ask Alex to do this task with him in case she does not like puzzles as much as he does. When he tells her this, she says, "Dylan, you have a talent. Let's do this."
I forgot to mention that in the beginning of the book, you learn that Dylan is dyslexic. So that was important. And the last thing I have forgotten to mention is that all of our videos and curriculum are in Spanish. And we actually have dubbed them with different actors, kids with different voices. It's not just like one voice doing the whole video. And that was something we were very committed to, and continue to want to make sure that our curriculum can be used in settings where having it in Spanish, makes it more accessible. And in general, what we talk about is that SuperDville is a stress-free zone for kids. And I feel like that's what Storyshares is also trying to do in creating books that are so engaging that some of the effort that they're going to have to make in learning new things in terms of reading just become easier.
So we shared quite a bit about our partnership, about the reasons behind that partnership, about the importance of social emotional learning with literacy. And we really want to make sure that you all get out of this webinar what you want to get out of it. So if you have any questions, if any questions have come up as you've watched the videos, looked through the resources as we've spoken about this connection between social emotional learning and literacy, we would love to hear them. So you can go ahead and drop those questions in the chat. We'll give everyone about 30 seconds to a minute to drop a question in, and then we will take some time to answer them. Okay, so we have a great question from Melanie on what age ranges do SuperDville and Storyshares serve? Peggy, if you want to give your SuperDville answer, and then I can build off it with the Storyshares one.
Excellent question. So our elementary school series is for 3rd through 5th grade, and it's sequenced. All the videos are recommended to be shown in a certain sequence for each grade. And then we have created a new series that is for 6th grade and is specifically for entering middle school. We do know that some teachers use the curriculum for 2nd grade. We have gotten that feedback.
So we have a very similar answer, which is one of the reasons why the resources pair so nicely together. The majority of structured literacy programs and literacy programs in general for foundational skills focus on students in grades pre-K to 1. And sometimes pre-K to 2. So Storyshares really starts off where a lot of other programs leave off. So we have series for upper elementary for grades 3 through 6. We have series for middle school where there's some overlap, grades 6 through 8. And then we have series for high school, grades 9 through 12. And then we also have resources for adult striving readers as well. So we typically say grades 3 and up. However, when we kind of started with the upper elementary series, we piloted these, and we've piloted all of our series in classrooms and with pilot partners. And to our surprise, similar to what Peggy shared, a lot of 2nd grade teachers ended up using that upper elementary series in their classrooms. So we have since expanded that to really be grades 2 through 6, and we feel really comfortable saying that given the lived experiences of the teachers. Okay, there is a fantastic question from James that I'm going to let Peggy take, and then I'm happy to build off it on some go-to SEL practices in a classroom setting.
Well, that's a great question. And I think that in piloting, which we did in 17 states, and have gotten, fantastic feedback, much of which was very positive, but we incorporated things. I think, by and large, we've created something where it's the act of using the video that's the first step in a practice, which is whether it's morning meeting or after recess. You bring kids together in a setting, whether it's a resource room or a general ed classroom, and you use the video as a stepping stone to have them start naming their feelings. So I think that's a practice. It's an SEL practice to have a discussion where kids start, identifying with the story and saying ways in which they can see that they have felt this way. And so that's one thing. And then we get into more specific things in our activities. So an example that I really like is trying to help kids have a way to remember how to calm down. Because obviously just saying, all right, you have to calm down doesn't really work. And so there's an activity after a video called Stress Mess, where the kids close their eyes for 60 seconds and have a piece of blank paper and a marker, and they are supposed to just draw with their eyes closed, just breathe. And as they breathe, just let the pen go. And after the 60 seconds, they open their eyes and they look at what they have on the paper. And then they're given the task with whatever colors they want to either color in what they created or turn it into an identifiable design, object, person. And at the end, they get to keep it and put it in their locker or on their desk, and it's a physical reminder of what it was like to breathe and calm down. So it's those kinds of things that we've developed to try and help kids. And then some wonderful, I think the more general SEL things that are out there, and lots of other organizations emphasize this, which is how to help build a classroom where all kids feel they belong and things like that. I mean, I think all of those things apply to what we're doing. Those all can be used. Like I've seen, beautiful videos of how teachers greet a child every morning, and all those kinds of tools I think are wonderful. But what we've done is the more targeted things to help kids be able to name what they're feeling, to have strategies for calming down, and to start identifying their goals and what they need to work on. And I mean, I don't know if you want me to be more specific than that, but that's, I think, the best way I can cover some of the ideas.
I think that those are really fantastic things that we can all walk away with. It is 1 o'clock, so I just want to be sensitive of the time. But I do think that for older students, like also giving them some sense of ownership and allowing them to set their own goals for themselves. I think so often, and I think the SuperDville videos do this really wonderfully. So often the goals we set for students are very top down and something that other people project onto students. Versus allowing them to really come up with their own, like, what do they want out of a given experience or out of a given literacy intervention or out of a class or out of an experience of a social emotional learning curriculum? Like, what do they want to get out of it to connect them to the why and their sense of investment? So there is one last very quick question. Sharon asked to clarify, is there an entire digital Storyshares book available on the SuperDville page once a person subscribes?
Yes, and I'm glad you asked that, Sharon, because I hope I was clear that when we talk about this 5th activity, that's a Storyshares book, it is a digital copy of the entire book, including the curriculum. You have access to that. And so a teacher, as I said, can read it aloud. If a teacher wants to get physical copies of the book to share, and use within the classroom, then they can order the bundle, but it's free. The digital copy of the story is free on the SuperDville website if you subscribe to SuperDville. Sure, do you want to go through the last slides?
Sure. Just real quick, this is a QR code that will link you to the feedback form for this session that will help us inform the types of webinars that we do from here on out. So please leave your feedback. It's very quick. It'll take you less than a minute. Melanie, is there anything I'm leaving out from that? No? Okay, cool. And we can also put the link to that in the chat. And then we would love for you to grab a free preview of some of these resources. And then also you can scan that second QR code to shop that bundle. It's really wonderful to have, we say at StoryShares that we're often like format agnostic. So we want the books to be in ebook and paperback. We want there to be video content, audio content. And when we're engaging older striving readers, having multiple modes of expression, a multi-sensory way of engaging with texts, that could be so, so, so powerful. And so this bundle really enables that to happen. So we are also including a QR code that will link you to that bundle, and you can learn a lot more on that page as well. Okay.
So this is just the QR code will take you to our website, and you'll be able to see some of the things that I referred to. There's the sample video and lesson plan, so you don't have to subscribe to get a real serious taste of what SuperDville is all about, both in Spanish and English.
And my email's on here. Our info@storyshares.org email is on here. If you have any questions, comments, resources you would like to see more of based on what we talked about today, or based on anything else that you're curious about in terms of literacy for older striving readers, we would love to stay in touch.
Thank you everyone for coming. If you have any follow-up questions, you can email info@StoryShares or Shira's email or Peggy. We really appreciate you being here, and a huge thank you to Shira and Peggy for leading this discussion. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for organizing it.
Thank you.